Welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, and today it's the Astrology Star Sisters talking about the Pisces Decans using astrology and tarot. And my astrology star sister, Joy Vernon, is here to join me today. Welcome, Joy. It's good to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Liz.
So we'll get right to it. Joy's website is joyvernon.com, and my website is alightpath.com. And we always enjoy hearing from you. So I took this picture the other day from my deck, and it was kind of misty and foggy. So I thought that was a good picture for Pisces because it
I
reminds me
love it.
of fog and mist.
Yeah.
So we're going to briefly use a little bit of tell you about Pisces. Do you want to start, Joy?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Pisces is a mutable water sign that is ruled by Jupiter. And so, our mutable keywords are finishing, evolving, mediating, or adapting. And so, basically, mutable signs, the cardinal signs are the start of a season. So, like our next one will be Aries, which starts the spring. And then the fixed signs are the fullness of the season. So Taurus is the fullness of spring, and then the end, the mutable sign is the transition between. So Gemini is the transition between spring and summer. You can see I'm obviously wanting to move ahead into the next season. So Pisces right now, we're transitioning out of winter and into spring. So this idea of transitioning, evolving, adapting, that's what is mutable. And so our ruling planet traditionally is Jupiter, and the modern ruler is Neptune, which is the lord of the ocean. And so that certainly makes good sense for Pisces. Its element is water, which represents fluidity, and it can be our emotions, our intuition, our subconscious, and our dreams. The mantra, I imagine, I believe, those are things that I've heard for Pisces. The keywords, Pisces is dreamy, intuitive, spiritual, sensitive. It's mystic and compassionate and imaginative. The caution on those is that it can get confused, nebulous, enmeshed, or just wanting to escape.
Okay, and then we're talking about the decans, and I know you wanted to add some stuff in here, so why don't you just go ahead and talk about the decans for us, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have this slide every session. That and the decans divide the 12 astrological signs into 3 equal parts. I think one thing that we haven't clarified, perhaps, that I think I'm trying to decide just like how natural it is to just recognize this and how much you have to think about it for a second to get this. But it's both a stretch of space. A decan is a stretch of space as well as a time period. And a lot of times we've been looking at them as the time period as the sun goes through it, but it's also just that stretch of space. But that makes perfect sense, just like, every zodiac sign is a stretch of space as well as matches the time period that's marked again by the sun's transit through that stretch of space. So I think if we can keep that in mind, that sometimes we're talking about a time period, sometimes we're talking about a location when we use that word decan.
Thank you. That helps clarify it. And we're in the time period of Pisces, and the major arcana card for Pisces is the moon. And that's from February 18th through March 20th. And Joy has chosen The Tarot of Spirit by Pamela Ekins and Joyce Ekins, and that was published by US Games. Do you want to talk about the moon card for us?
Yeah, I mean, this particular card is just so lovely and has such a gentle. This whole deck has such a gentle, mystical. That's why I chose it. Of all none of I looked at maybe half a dozen decks or maybe a little bit more. But this is the first one that came to mind when I was trying to think, what is my most mystical deck? You know, what is the most intuitive? And not just intuitive, but has a little bit of that dreamy element as well. And this is the first one that came to mind. And the very first tarot class that I ever taught in 1994, a woman that took the class had this deck and she used it in that class. And that's when I first became aware of it. And she got such good readings with it. So it kind of was like, you know, oh, remember that deck. And here we have this beautiful kind of crescent moon goddess that just kind of drifts into this kind of out of space and down into kind of almost a landscape. There's the two wolves, or wolf and dog, however you see it, and I need to maximize this so I can actually see this better. And I'm like, are there two wolves or is that a tree stump over there? I'm not sure. And I like that little bubble that has this other landscape within it. And the idea of the protection that we get with the moon, and I think with some of these Piscean ideas of dreaminess or of escapism, it's like this protective bubble that kind of represents this this potential and this growth and things like that. I mean, it's just a very, very beautiful card. It's definitely strongly influenced by Kabbalah as well as astrology. The creators of this deck are very well versed in those disciplines. And as in most traditional cards, we do see the Yuds kind of raining down in the card, which is like this descent of divine energy. In some of the TDM decks, the Tarot de Marseille decks, the Yuds don't rain down so much as they're being absorbed back by the moon, which is kind of interesting. But even if you don't want to think about it Kabbalistically, you can just think of it as dew coming down, from the moon. So very, very beautiful, intuitive, dreamy card. I guess another thing that I think about with the moon, especially, this to me looks more like two wolves, but a lot of times there's a wolf and a dog. And so the idea of evolution comes in mind with the moon card. The Rider-Waite-Smith has, in the TDM style, has a crustacean of some sort coming out of the ocean. Again, there's kind of an image maybe of evolution going on. There's a timelessness and a deep memory that goes on with the moon card, which is partly also related not just to the Piscean qualities, which are so that do have that kind of time without time there's a delving into deep primordial themes, I think, with Pisces. But also the moon in Kabbalah is Kof, which means the back of the head, which is where we get a lot of our more the vision hallucinations, but also having visions or things like that kind of come into play, and from there we can also get into some of the more kind of autonomic systems and fight or flight responses, and some, again, more of the primal kind of aspects of the brain. So yeah, a lot going on in that card and in that symbolism.
Well, and this moon card reminds me more of colder nights or a wintry time than maybe some of the other decks of the moon, but it's such a beautiful card. I really like it, and I like this deck. I've been using it for years myself. So we're going to go now into Pisces Decan number 1, and it's the 8 of Cups, and I'll let Joy tell you all about it.
So our Golden Dawn title is Lord of Abandoned Success, and the key word on the Crowley Harris Toth deck is indolence. Um, and I'm not sure that either one of those is illustrated in this particular card here. In fact, it's a lot of times when you see geometric shapes on a card, they usually add up to the number, and this actually doesn't. We get a rectangle as well as a I don't know what you call it, a pentangle or something like that, but a five-sided figure pentagon. I guess a pentagon doesn't have to be symmetrical, so it could be a pentagon. And so and that adds up to 9. But and there are these 8 kind of, again, enclosed, kind of egg-like gestational um, uh, um, bubbles, kind of like we saw in the moon card, that have plants growing in them. And they just look like plants in potted plants. And so this idea again of something gestational, of something growing, of something protected. I think there's a lot of that energy that's going on with this illustration. The Decan ruler is Saturn, using the Chaldean system, which we use in tarot. And you can see this card has the astrological glyphs worked into the artwork. And so of those 2 rows of plants on the bottom row on the left-hand side, the first one on the left-hand side on the bottom is Saturn, and then over towards the right, on the right-hand side, the bottom row, we see the Pisces. And so they're not badly hidden. They're not hard to find in the artwork, but they're not in the border of the card. So you have to search a little bit to find them. And Saturn does represent boundaries and limitations. And so some of that protectiveness might be coming in there with Saturn. I always think of Saturn, to me, is it's the boundaries and the limitations, and trying to define, to limit, to find the border of something. And Pisces is the ocean. It's boundless, and Pisces has a boundless quality and a timeless quality. And so Saturn is trying to find the boundary of the boundless, and the just the kind of overwhelming inability to achieve that comes out, I think, in this card. So that, I guess that's probably what I have to say about that one.
Well, and I like, she calls it still waters, and I kind of like that. It's, to me, it's kind of like being in the in between, or taking a time out, because whatever you were probably working on wasn't quite working for some reason. And so to me, that still waters, I like that description that she's used.
Yeah, that's a good, it is a good it works well with the Saturn influence, I think. Saturn would bring some stillness to that, I think. So, yeah.
Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about astrologically what Saturn's doing in the sky. And Saturn is in Pisces, so, and we were talking about the Pisces season, and so I'll let you take it away, Joy.
Yeah, and so while we've got the time period of the sun being in the first decan of Pisces, we do have Saturn in Pisces still. It's no longer in that first decan, which is the decan it rules. It's in the second decan, which is ruled by Jupiter, which we'll get onto next time with our next set of slides. But what we have, very interestingly, is the Saturn in Pisces with Mars in Cancer trining it. And they're only a few degrees apart, but we have several planets going through that space during this Pisces season. And that has a specific astrological name called enclosure by malefics, or called besiegement. And so it says it's described as a planet being trapped between the rays of Mars and Saturn, or any two malefics. And you can include any of the outer planets as malefics, so Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto. And, if you want to work with any of the asteroids that are considered difficult, or any, I don't know all the rules about it, but I know it doesn't have to be just Mars and Saturn. And so the sun, moon, and Mercury all end up being besieged in Pisces during this time period. And so in this slide, and I think we'll cover most of them, but the moon, it also doesn't, it can be besieged from a different angle. And so the moon actually gets besieged during this time, I think, and there can't be any other planets inserting their rays into the location of that besiegement. So we actually get the moon besieged at least 3 times during this month, and maybe more. I'm not sure I noticed all of them. So it's kind of something to watch for. But again, right now, what we see, this chart is showing Mercury at 7 degrees of Pisces trine to Mars. So it's just come into that trine to Mars. And now for that 3 degrees, as it travels between Mars and Jupiter, there's no other planets that are inserting their rays into that 3-degree swath of the zodiac. And so Saturn, or Mercury, is going, it's the I don't know, it's any kind of movie where you're trying to run, like everybody's shooting like crazy, and you have to get from one hiding place to the next hiding place, and you run as fast as you can in between. That's basically what Mercury is trying to do right now. And we'll see this happens with the sun and moon as well. And so Mercury is already debilitated in Pisces. Because it rules and is exalted in Virgo, it's both in detriment and fall in Pisces. And it's I don't think I looked up. I think I looked up, but I don't think I wrote down its shadow period for its retrograde, but it has that retrograde coming up too. You don't happen to know it off the top of your head, Liz, do you, when the shadow period starts on that?
No, not off the top of my head, but I will be doing a show on that in the next few weeks, so people can come
Oh,
back and
perfect.
watch that.
Okay, yeah. So if its shadow starts during that 17, I don't think it does. I don't think it goes back that far. But at any rate, it's just like it feels like Mercury's having a really hard time of it, is what I'm saying. And even if it's not including that shadow period, we still have a debilitated Mercury. We still have it just trying to dash between these two difficult situations. And then from there, it basically just, and really it kind of, I think I think that it also is basically, I think the nodal axis is considered malefic. And so it kind of,
Mm.
if you use the nodes as malefics, it's also besieged between Saturn and the nodes. So there can be a lot of stress right through this area, and this area of the chart too. The besiegement is what's really important this month, but we're going to revisit this area of the chart over the next few months. There's a lot of things happening here, especially with both Mercury and Venus going retrograde back into Pisces. And the sun going through there. We've got some really interesting stuff coming up. Yeah, so just a lot of challenges, and mercurial challenges to your basic Mercury retrograde things basically happening early, but speaking and writing and travel and commerce are all things that can be confused, because that's the confusion that we get, the nebulousness that we get from Pisces, and is really what we're probably looking at, like so much confusion. It's hard to straighten things out, and you might straighten it out once you get into Aries, but then you're just going to retrograde back. So
Exactly. So enclosure or besiegement, that means the planet, or it sounds like it has a little bit of restriction around it and has a little bit of trouble or delay in moving forward with what it wants to do. Is that correct?
yeah, and to me, I'm so kinesthetic and kind of intuitive, emotional about the way I feel these things. And so to me, it's a stress. It's a different kind of, just like a delay, like the delays that I get during a normal Mercury retrograde might just be kind of a frustration and okay, well, I'm just going to have to be patient. But this has more stress to it, like, oh no, I feel this tension going on right now. I feel these threats around me. That I think there's a component of that to it. And so we would add not just kind of those kind of the frustrations that we would get when Mercury is not doing well, but add in an added layer of difficulty and anxiety around it. Anxiety is probably a good word. Mercury rules the nerves. And so, and in Pisces, the nervous disorder that would come from this is much more along the lines of inattentiveness, getting lost or confused, or having memory problems, those types of things. But add in the anxiety around that. And you're starting to feel what Mercury's feeling when it goes through that gauntlet there.
So a good time to do some good self-care or take time out, or a walk in nature, or a hot bath or something.
Yeah.
Okay, now we have the Mars station direct. Mars was retrograde from December 6th of 2024 until February 23rd of 25. And it traveled in the area of 6 degrees Leo back to 17 degrees of Cancer. And what would you like to tell us about that?
So, yay, it's finally. So this is coming up February 23rd. That went right over my moon. So it's been like, Mars, be nice to me, please. And so it rules Mars actually rules our our third decan. It rules the third decan. But the time period, this is why I was asking you, it's like, do I put the Mars station direct during the time period of the first decan or when we're talking about the third decan? And so we're in the time period still of the first decan. And so I decided to talk about it here, but yeah, it went through a pretty wide swath of, I think of Mars. Mars is a soldier, right? And so it takes 2 years, 24 months about to go around the entire zodiac. So you would say, oh, 12 signs to 24 months, that's 2 months per sign. No, that's not how Mars works. He's a soldier, so he runs double time through most of the signs until he gets to the place where he's going to retrograde. And then he's like a soldier, that's where his battlefield is. And so then he's just back and forth on the battlefield, like stomping up and down and killing everything in sight, and just stomping around for a couple months or more. What is this, December? This is like 2.5 months or something. And so that's what Mars, he's been stomping around in the beginning of Leo and in the last third of more than almost half of Cancer. So that's what he's been doing, and finally he's gonna go forward and kind of clear out of there, and then go back to running double time to his next battle that he wants to fight.
That sounds good. And I'll be glad when Mars is direct. It goes direct opposite my sun, so but it feels like things will get done in a more timely manner, and we might be busier too.
Yeah, I gotta say, Mars can be very frustrating, and there's a lot more. Um, my boyfriend, his Mars is in this area, and my moon is in this area, so I can feel us getting a little tense once in a while. But I know what's going on, and I just, and it. Both of us are just really good at like feeling the tension and letting it go. And so that's like an example of something that can be happening. But I'll tell you, I have been so energized with that Mars retrograde, because when the Mars can bring you energy, it can exacerbate some things. And definitely I have had some extra cuts and burns. I always do when Mars does anything around my moon. But there's some benefits. Yeah, there's definitely some benefits. I agree.
Okay, is there anything else you wanted to say about the Mars station direct? Because I will have a show on that with Justin in a few days. So
Oh, excellent. Good.
okay, so we're at Pisces Decan number 2. It's the 9 of Cups, and the Jupiter is the ruling planet. And I'll let Joy tell us all about it.
And so again, our Golden Dawn idea is the Lord of material happiness. And in the Crowley, the key word on the Crowley-Harris Toth deck is just happiness. I do think that I try not to get too involved in the titles, particularly with this show, but I think that that's a very important distinction, that the Golden Dawn one is material happiness, and I think it's very significant uh, for the card. One of the things that's really fascinating about this tarot card is that it's ruled by Jupiter, which is the greater benefic, in Pisces, which is the sign that it rules, so it's at home. And it's called happiness. And that just right there, most people go that far and they're like, this is the best card, this is the nicest card, this is where I want to be. It's really interesting, the Rider-Waite-Smith illustration, because it shows this man in kind of a merchant's hat sitting on a low bench with his arms folded, and there's like a high shelf with cups on it behind his head. And it seems those cups, because it's a high, narrow shelf, it doesn't look like they're cups that he was drinking from. It looks like they're cups he won. And so this idea of winning an accomplishment kind of comes out with a card. A lot of people call it the wish card, and I do think that Arthur Edward Waite is the source of that. I do not think that this is a good card to wish on. And the other thing that happens is that people that use a non-Kabbalistic form of numerology that only goes through nines, they feel that the 9 is the conclusion of the numerical progression. And so that they say that this is the accomplishment of the suit. And but tarot doesn't work that way. It goes to 10. And so and a lot of people, I mean, they do that, but they say 10s are new beginnings. But if you look at the illustrations, it just doesn't make sense that way. And just in terms of how the cards are illustrated. I mean, it's any system that you want to use. That's one of the things about esoteric tarot. Any system that you want to add and layer on absolutely 100% works. It's just that we're always trying to reconcile what we're layering onto the cards with the card images, and trying to see what really is working the best. And this is an example where it kind of falls short. And that Pythagorean numerology just doesn't really get us there, because there's still we go from the 9 to the 10. And so we've got this kind of smug guy, who won all these trophies in the 9, and that seems pretty nice. But the 10 is, a couple and their arms are out, and there's the cups in a rainbow, there's land around them and a little house in the background and 2 children dancing. I mean, that feels fulfilling. The guy with the awards feels like he accomplished something, but it doesn't feel as fulfilling, as emotionally fulfilling. And the cups are the suit of emotions. It doesn't feel as emotionally fulfilling as the 10. And in Kabbalistic numerology, it's not, because it doesn't. The 9 does not complete the sequence, the numerical sequence. 10 does. And so the idea of material happiness specifies that and says, well, this is happiness on the material plane. This is, you got the things that you wanted, and you've got the necessities that you need, but it hasn't yet reached that level of the 10, which is the full fulfillment and the emotional fulfillment that you get with the 10. And so there's just a lot of nuance you can really pull out of that card if you spend the time with it. That said, this particular illustration here shows the tree of life without, well, I suppose the rainbow down into the grass represents the 10, and the 9 is the bottom sphere here. But it's only showing 9. It's not showing the complete tree. Although in some ways there is an idea of a perfected tree, where that 10th sephira would be in that open spot below the top 3. There's kind of there's a room for one more sphere there, and that's where it would go. And there's an idea of a perfected tree, and so I love this deck, and I love the energy that you get off the cards. There's so much flow in this, even as symmetrical as it is. There's a lot of flow and a lot of descent of energy, and the rainbow descending, and everything, and again right down into the earth, which is very nice. And so there is a lot of positivity here. I think I think the thing with Jupiter, and I guess this is where I really want to go with this, is that Jupiter, we usually Jupiter, every planet has its characters that it plays, and so Jupiter can be the advisor to the king. He can be the teacher. He can be a magistrate, but Jupiter is also the priest, and Pisces is extremely spiritual, even mystical. And so when you think about a priest or someone that expresses a very mystical, um, uh, not just outlook on the world, but practice and the way of living their life, and you tell them, oh, you can have material happiness, that's not what they want. And that's the problem with this card, is that it is a temptation away from what Jupiter and Pisces wants, which is spiritual happiness. And so it's literally a temptation. And I think that's the problem with the problem with the card. It's why the astrology belies the illustration and the title, and 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 the illustration here, um, I think in many ways, probably if I spent more time with it, I probably could describe this as the perfect illustration from what I'm trying to talk about, because it's not letting the energy descend down into the material level. It's trying to hold it up into a more mystical or spiritual expression. Um, so that's just my thoughts on it. We'll see. Still has
Well, thank you.
that rainbow
Whoops,
fall
I
down.
went too many. Okay, here we go. So we're going to look at Jupiter, and Jupiter's at 12 degrees of Gemini, circled in yellow. The sun in Pisces is square to that Jupiter, and the sun's circled in blue. And Venus is stationed retrograde at 10 Aries, and there's a purple arrow pointing to Venus. So I'll go ahead and talk about all those things.
Oh yeah. Um, and um, and it says that Mercury had been square to Jupiter on February 20th. So this chart here is from March 2nd. So Mercury had done that prior, had squared Jupiter prior to going through that besiegement with Mars and Saturn. So this is one where we actually do get in the sun in the time period of the second decan, and the ruler of the second decan, Jupiter, is interacting with that sun at that time period. So this one this one definitely goes here, and so the I think one of the main things is that the sun is now in the place that Saturn had been for a long time. We'd seen that Saturn now is out of that middle decan, and his retrograde had been through that middle decan, so he had been in there for a long time. And with Jupiter's retrograde around the same time in the middle decan of Gemini, we had both of them square to each other, and then we were getting those T squares with a bunch of stuff going through Sagittarius. I think we had some Virgo placements that were activating a T square there. And so Saturn's finally kind of moved away. Interestingly, it's Saturn that went direct first, and Jupiter is still lollygagging. And so now the sun has caught up to it, and the and I guess my main thought here is just that the sun is perhaps resolving or putting the finishing touches on a lot of that T-square momentum that we had at the end of last year. I think it even went up into, didn't it go right up into New Year's Eve? That we were having some exact squares there. And now the sun is kind of doing a final pass and just like, hey, is everything okay? Did we collect everything? Are we good to move on now? It feels slightly administrative and slightly reassuring and like it's tying up the loose ends. I guess is how I feel that.
That's a good way to put it. I like that. Anything else you want to talk about this slide, or are we ready to go to the next one?
Yeah, I think we can go. Venus does some things, but she's not quite as, she's just not very strongly involved in anything this month. Maybe she'll come up next month. So, and probably somebody has some like really amazing things to say about Venus, and I'm just like, I got nothing. So here's our next besiegement, which is the sun. And now this is where the sun has moved forward into 17 degrees, where it is trine to Mars. And so Mars is sending his rays towards the sun, and the sun has to now move forward. And again, that's just like Mercury had before. Now it's the sun having to run, like everybody's shooting it down, having the shootout in the movie, and the sun has to run from one place of hiding to another and risk being shot at during as it quickly runs through that. And so now we're talking about the sun energy, the solar energy, which is more kind of comprehensive. Any other planet is going to really represent their unique little area of focus, and the sun is a little bit more general, and does have that leadership role as well. And so the leader is basically under fire at this point. And again, that'll be about 3 or 4 days that it takes to go through that little time period starting March 7th. And I think what happens, and I might have a slide for it, I think the moon catches up with Mars in there. And I don't remember if I added a slide for that or not. But I think
No.
okay, this is going back. So believe me, I had it made sense in my mind when I put this together. So this goes back to February 28th. So this is when the moon was in Pisces. We'll see if I included a one for the moon in Cancer. It might come up later. It might come up in the third decan, maybe. I don't remember what I did. So here's moon trine Mars and applying to Saturn. And so that's going to be, because again, it's only about 3 degrees, that would happen just on that one day and be kind of fast. And this is going to be, the moon is going to represent more of those emotions. And so again, this is where the moon is precisely trying to Mars, enters into that place of besiegement and has to run between Mars's antagonistic energy being thrown at it and then cross past Saturn.
Okay, and then we move into Pisces Decan number 3, the 10 of Cups, and Mars is the ruling planet. And I'll let you tell us about this card. It's a beautiful card.
Yeah, I totally love this deck. And again, just so intuitive and mystical, and has a lot of depth to it, and bright and colorful. The colors are so beautiful. And here we've got this amazing fountain that has these 10, it's kind of like this staff. It almost looks like a wands, ace of wands or something, except it's like this column with these fountains at the top, and these beautiful rainbow colors in the background. Not too bright, so there's a slight subtlety to it, but just very, very beautiful. And this is our Golden Dawn title, Lord of Perfected Success, which I learned as perpetual success, and I do think it's a nicer title, but the Golden Dawn title is perfected success. And the fountain, even a lot of the ideas, a lot of the illustrations for me really express that idea of an ongoing, you've made it through everything, this is an ongoing success. It's not that you've perfected. To me, like the Four of Wands is perfected work, and that is like you and the Crowley title is completion. You completed something, you perfected it, it's done, it's over. That's what perfected means to me, whereas perpetual means ongoing, and this ongoing flow of success and happiness. So that's how I look at it. But this is Mars ruling that third decan of Pisces, and I think this is another kind of head scratcher that Jupiter, again, we're using the tarot uses a Chaldean order for the decans. And so Jupiter rules the 9 of Cups, and then Mars rules the 10 of Cups. And the 10 of Cups is a better card than the 9 of Cups. And so how does that work? You know, once you try to put Mars, a malefic, in with the best card, and Jupiter, a benefic, in with the not quite as good card, you know, you've got to, it takes some meditation, which is good for Pisces, to really think through that and recognize what needs to happen here. And so I think again, this is maybe a little bit where that perfected versus perpetual thing comes in, because if we look at this as total accomplishment, we're done, then, you know, when you've really accomplished and finished something, you don't want to, you want to rest, you want to take a break, you want to celebrate. Mars gives us that motivation to extend and find, how can we keep this going? What energy do we put into this to maintain and have this be perpetual and have this be ongoing? This is also the place where Mars rules 2 decans in a row. And remember that the decanic sequence following the tarot starts in Leo, and it starts with Saturn ruling the first decan of Leo, and so then it goes all the way through Cancer and concludes with the 4 of Cups, before we move on to the 5 of Wands. And so here is where we get, and there's 36 decans, but 7 planets times into into 36 is 5 with 1 left over, and so every planet gets 5 cards, and then one planet has to get 6 cards, and so Mars is the planet that gets 6 cards, and that's the 10 of Cups, and it adds the 10 of Cups and the 2 of Cups, or 2 of Wands, and so it concludes the zodiacal sequence at the 10 of Cups at the end of Pisces, and then starts the zodiacal sequence at the beginning of Aries with the 2 of Wands. And so we'll see Mars again next month. And the reason that what I learned is that Mars at the end of winter, as we transition into spring, we need that extra heat of Mars to warm the ground and melt the snows and melt the ice and bring a little extra heat so that the seeds will germinate and so that we have a fertile spring and an abundant summer and so on. And so that to me adds a lot of the why we have Mars here at this really one of the very nicest cards in the deck.
Yes, a lovely card, the Fountain of Love. So we have the full moon in Virgo, which is also a lunar eclipse on March 13th. I'll just let you talk about it.
Yeah, and so here we've got that the sun is only a degree or so past, degree and a half past Saturn, and the the nodal axis is kind of close, which is why we've got the eclipse, and the sun is the sun's at 2356 and Uranus is at 2402. So the sun is very tightly sextile over to Uranus there, which is then tightly trine with the moon. And so so we've got this, and this is one of those things that's like, okay, the sun made it through the gauntlet between Mars and Saturn, and then it goes straight into an eclipse situation where it's eclipsing that moon, that full moon, and it's through, and we're throwing Uranus in, to really mix things up. And that just that kind of unexpected energy that can bring some innovation and some stuff like that, but a lot of times it just is some kind of upset, rebellious, upset type of energy, and because it is any of the outer planets can be considered malefics, this full moon is besieged between Saturn and Uranus. Again, because it's there's no other planets in between 22 and 24 that are sending their rays in, and so so that full moon, both the sun and the moon are besieged between Saturn and Uranus. And so an eclipsed moon, a besieged moon, again, it just feels a lot of frustrations and challenges. And I think when I was really working a lot with the Pisces, because, and these are all these elements that are trying to, Pisces is a place of gestation, and everything is gestating there in Pisces and trying to be born into Aries. And the big thing that we're all looking forward towards is that ultimate Saturn and Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries, which doesn't actually happen. That aspect and the conjunction doesn't actually perfect until February of 2026. Even though both Neptune and Saturn move into Aries, Saturn never catches up to Neptune this year. It just goes back. They both go back retrograde, and they spend the summer in Aries, but then they both retrograde back, and we don't get the perfection of that aspect till February of 2026. And so a lot of this energy, as I've been working with that, because I've done a few talks on it, and as I work with it, it just feels like energy that doesn't want to be born. It doesn't want to come into fruition. And I think we're just seeing this between the besiegement, between the retrogrades, between this eclipsed full moon and besieged full moon. It's just like trying to bring, because the full moon represents achievement and a realization of something, and the the um, the fruiting of something, and it's just like nothing's happening, and it just won't come forward, and the situation is so difficult and so challenging. So it's there, yeah, there's a lot of I still find Pisces energy to be, I mean, we've got Neptune there for so long. and so it's been, there's certainly a lot of that feeling of confusion, but a lot of people are starting to really get their intuition and psychic abilities opening up during this, long transits in Pisces. And as all of this stuff is trying to be brought forth into consciousness at zero Aries, we just see all of these challenges to that. And it's like any of those hospital TV shows where, they're trying to keep the baby inside the mom, but there's something wrong and they have to like take it out and work on it and put it back or something. I don't know. Or any kind of difficult birth analogy, where it's like lay low, bed rest, don't lift anything heavy, whatever they say. Really, really be, and that goes back to our moon energy of protection and our Saturn energy of protection, and Mars is in here offering his warriors ability to protect things. And those, they can be difficult, but Saturn, I often think of Saturn as a bouncer, and Mars will fight to protect something. And so, and it's just getting Saturn clear on who to bounce and send out and who to let in, and making sure Mars isn't just fighting anybody that comes his way, but is keeping you safe and protected. I mean, all of these things, all of these challenges, if you put them in that right perspective, you start to see the really strong set of protection we have going on here, as they protect this new developing thing.
Yes, and the lunar eclipse is about releasing things that are no longer of use or necessary. And the ending of Pisces is like you say about the birthing process. It's like letting go of what's been, and now we get to recreate, because Aries is a cardinal sign. It's new beginning. So this 0 degrees Aries point is being activated over and over and over and over again. And it's so, maybe we've released some things, but it's going to take us until we get into 2026 to fully release everything we need to release. Because maybe I've been cleaning out my closets, and it's like I've released quite a bit, but there'll probably be some more things for me to let go of later on, or maybe another drawer or the garage perhaps. So thank you.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, then we have the Pisces court card, which is the Knight of Cups, which covers the last decan of Aquarius and the first 2 decans of Pisces. And would you like to talk about this card?
Yeah, absolutely. And this deck follows a Thoth deck court card formula, and so it's called the Father of Water. But it does represent that Knight of Cups, which the Knight is the top card in the Crowley series, and you can see that it's a knight. It's on a horse. And so, and I mean, this is it just right here. That knight is um, there's one tarot artist that I know that calls the knights the heroes, and that's a real and we're not talking about Mars now, but there's still that sense of that protective quality, whether it's a paternal quality like Saturn, or whether it's a martial quality of I'll fight for you, big brother type of Mars quality. I think that that's kind of coming out here. Again, this is the it's still, and again, the artwork is so gorgeous. It's like it's you see like a cliff and all this green that could be grass, but the horse is obviously swimming, and it's like, are we swimming in land or is it in the ocean? There's a cliff behind it, there's a storm going on. All of this, it just describes everything that we talked about, but that the horse is so beautiful, and there's like this white shroud. Remember all those bubbles that we've seen? There's this kind of white shroud that seems very protective. It's like and some people, that's a Pisces thing. Remember, escapism is a Pisces caution word, but at the same time, that's a legitimate way of dealing and coping with things. And using our escapism sometimes is a way of protecting, but also using our dreams, using this time for self-development, like you said, letting go of things and cleaning out closets. Those are all ways that we can protect ourselves and dive deep and understand a lot of inner stuff right now. And that can be very protective. There's Paul Foster Case refers to meditation as mental angling like fishing. So the idea of fishing in water, and there's something that is very Piscean about that. It can represent meditation is one of its benefits. So there's a lot of inner work that we can be doing when the outside world is feeling chaotic or threatening.
So I would say during this Pisces time to be patient, breathe, uh, be kind to yourself and others with a little bit extra stress that may be applied with these besiegements. Uh, what would you suggest to work through that or for this time period?
Yeah, just all those things that we've talked about. Meditation, inner work, shadow work would be great during a besiegement. It might bring some things up. Don't put it aside. You know, Confront it, talk to it, understand it. I'm suddenly drawn to back to Carl Jung and reading some stuff there, just out of the blue. And of course, all you have to do is read like a few pages of Jung, and your dreams it will pop in, and just like at whatever level they're usually at, they'll definitely uh, level up. And so yeah, dream work, psychology, depth psychology, inner work, meditation, all of that kind of stuff is stuff that's going to be extremely beneficial during this time period.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank you for joining me today and having you back next month to talk about Aries and the Aries Decans. And I want to thank all those that have been watching live and those that will come back and watch um, later. I appreciate you and we appreciate you. And we look forward to seeing you again watching our channel. And Joy and I both do consultations, have newsletters, and YouTube channels. So we always appreciate you subscribing. and liking and leaving comments. Joy has a Substack that she'll tell you about.
Oh yeah, I have a blog. I've blogged since 2009, but I recently started posting some things onto Substack as well, and I think it's for people that like to read. I think that's a great place to find me and to follow me.
And then Joy will be talking at OPA, which is the Organization for Professional Astrologers, on March 30th, experiencing the 4 elements to bring the chart to life, and the website to sign up for that. If you're an OPA member, it's free. And if you're not an OPA member, I believe it's $15. It's opaastrology.org. You can find it on there to sign up. Is there anything you'd like to say about this?
Yeah, and this is this is something this, I guess this goes into Aries season, but I'm really focusing on how to different ways of connecting with the elements on a really visceral, experiential level. I think that we get so caught up with keywords and with like book learning that we forget that all of these things are living energies, and the signs are based on the elements and the modes and their ruling planets. And the more and we can come into a really deep relationship with these things on a very intuitive level when we learn to express them and to connect with them. And as long as it's in the head, and you're things fall flat, and things will feel very limited. But when you can be it and experience it and live it and feel the fire energy and drift in the water energy, then you can, it brings delineations to life. It allows you to feel it with a client when you're talking to them about things in the chart, and as you feel it with them, that helps open your intuition and increases your connection with them when you're talking to them, and all kinds of things. I've worked with the elements long before I ever got into astrology, because it was part of my practice in neo-paganism, and then it became, which was my first entry into things like that. And then the tarot, of course, it's the 4 suits, and then it was so easy to transition into astrology. It's just like, oh, got that. So I'm encouraging, but so many people come to astrology from a real analytical place, and I think learning to experience the elements, and use that as stepping stones to get you into experiencing all of the planets and the modes and all of that, is a really useful a useful trick to learn.
Thank you. Other shows that I have, for the Astrology Star Sisters, we have the Dwarf Planets, Planet Stationing, the Decans, Fixed Stars, Uranian Astrology, Chinese Astrology, and the Venus Star Point. Justin and I do the astrology forecast each month, and a full moon forecast, and a Chiron asteroid series. And I've been doing astrological highlights for 2025. I still have a few more shows of those. And then a new show is going to be Magical Astrology with Robert Passetti. And then I will be on Talk Cosmos on February 23rd at 1 p.m. Pacific time, talking about the Pisces new moon. And again, to get a hold of Joy, it's joyvernon.com is her website, and my website is alightpath.com. And I want to thank Joy for being here and all those that have watched my show. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.